I'm lying in bed. It's close to midnight. I'm thinking about a conversation I had earlier that day with a friend. I'm trying to play it back in my head, wondering if what I said was the right thing to say. Did I use the right words? Or maybe I just shouldn't have said anything. Why did I even have to bring it up? But I'm sure she didn't even care. Why am I even worrying about it? It's not a big deal. Yep, it's not a big deal. But what if I'm wrong? What if I did say something wrong? And then the cycle repeats, and it's now 2 a.m., and I'm still up. In our fast-paced world, many of us struggle with overthinking and worry that leaves us feeling overwhelmed or stuck. In this podcast, we will hear stories of successful individuals and have conversations on ways to reach our true potential by embracing every micro detail of our identity, especially the flaws that make us unique. This is your host, Maria Grace Wolk. I'm a Filipina American entrepreneur, psychotherapist, and mom of 2 boys. And my mission is to amplify diverse perspectives and experiences and inspire your journey to wellness and fulfillment. A week later, I'm sitting in the school library, my face buried in books, preparing for a presentation. I stay a little later after school to work on this and up all night making sure I have all the information and data I need. It has to be perfect. All the other students said they're already done. And I'm still feeling like I'm not going to be ready on time. There's just so much to do, and my stomach starts turning into knots. That very same week, I'm in my room. I've been sitting on my bed scanning the clothes that are hanging in my closet, looking for an outfit to wear. I have a closet overflowing with clothes that Marie Kondo would have a ball to organize, but I can't find anything because a part of me doesn't really want to go. I mean, I don't know if I will have fun or if I'm going to end up talking to no one or, I'm thinking it's just so much more tempting to stay at home and stay in my pajamas and Netflix all night. But I managed to get ready. And as soon as I pull up at the event, my heart starts racing. My breathing becomes shallow, and it's going to be a long night. Can you relate? For as long as I can remember, I've struggled with anxiety. And back then, I had no idea. I didn't know what it was that I was feeling. I just thought that something must be wrong with me. And that's a common reaction and response as a child. Studying psychology and learning so much about how our mind and our body are connected and how all of our experiences as a whole make up who we are. Finally, I understood it. I am clearly not alone, as anxiety is the most common mental disorder in the United States. Thankfully, today, I'm able to manage it so much better than I used to back then. But still, I wish that I knew then what I know now. It would have made my life so much easier. So here we are, and here I am doing this podcast for that reason, to let my listeners who are struggling know that they are not alone, and it is highly treatable. Anxiety is our body's natural response to stress. Feeling anxious about certain events in our life is normal, and sometimes being anxious can be helpful. When we're anxious about a test, we study more. When we're anxious about speaking in public, we prepare and we practice more. Anxiety about doing something completely new and out of our comfort zone is also expected and perfectly normal. But if your feelings of anxiety are extreme, last for longer than 6 months, and are interfering with your life, that's when it becomes a problem. So anxiety refers to the anticipation of a future concern. Worrying about what might happen, what could happen, right? And it can cause people to try to avoid the situations that trigger or worsen their symptoms. And for me, reflecting back, what I've noticed when I was younger was that I would skip out on social events due to avoiding the uncomfortable feeling of anxiety, that rapid heartbeat, the worrying about all that could go wrong scenarios. It's exhausting. So I would opt out. But if I was to explore this even further, this discomfort leads to fear of not belonging, which many women of color can relate to, right? Because to go even deeper, within, it is rooted from experiences of systemic oppression and all the microaggression that we may have experienced in the past. We may have experienced times in our lives where we were made to feel different in a negative way. And as humans, we all have this need, the human need to belong, to feel like you belong. And if that's not there, we don't feel safe. And our body can't tell sometimes what the context is of the situation. But what we feel is fear. And with fear, fear is the emotional response when you feel threat, right? It triggers our fight, flight, or freeze reaction. And the main purpose of the fight, flight, or freeze response is to protect us. And when it's activated, our whole physical system undergoes this major temporary hormonal and physiological changes designed to enhance our ability to either run away or stand still or be ready to fight. It's a survival instinct that our ancient ancestors developed many years ago. So the anxiety, therefore, it's a warning sign that potentially something bad might happen. So anxiety is really a good thing. It's supposed to protect us. It just has gotten a bad rap. And what I like to use is the metaphor used by Bessel van der Kolk, a psychiatrist and researcher, author of the New York Times bestseller, The Body Keeps the Score. He talks about how our anxiety is our body's smoke detector in our brain. Just like how a smoke detector would go off when there is a fire on the stove, right? But of course, we've all seen what the smoke detector in the kitchen goes off for very little reason, and when the house is actually not on fire. The smoke detector will blare just as loud for a real fire as it would if we had only burned toast. And when the signaling system overreacts to small things, the results can be anxiety. So anxiety has two parts to it. There's the cognitive part, which is the thinking part where you worry and obsess over things. And there's also the somatic part, which is the physical symptoms, how your body is reacting. And this is important because once you have an understanding of what anxiety is and why it's happening and how normal it is and how to manage it, your life will become so much easier. The physical symptoms of anxiety, there's the shortness of breath, feeling like you can't breathe. It's like heaviness on your chest. And then there's also fatigue when you feel extremely tired suddenly. Then there's muscle tensions, having that back or shoulder aches, even neck pains or just muscle weakness. And then, of course, the increased heart rate, like your heart is beating out of your chest. And then the headaches, the dizziness, I think those are pretty common. And then the trouble swallowing or feeling like there's just that lump in your throat or even dry mouth. And you get that digestive discomfort too. The frequent use of the bathroom, heartburns, or even bloating are symptoms of anxiety. And then there's like the sweaty palms, of course, and some tingly sensations. And it's important to keep in mind that all of these symptoms, they can also be associated with other medical disorders. So you always want to check with your doctor first to rule out any other medical conditions before you conclude that it's anxiety. Some data here, 40 million adults in the United States suffer from anxiety. You're definitely not alone. And 19% of that population are adults, and 31% of that population are adolescents between 13 and 18 years old. Research shows that untreated teenagers with anxiety disorders are at a higher risk to perform poorly in school, miss out on social experiences, and engage in substance abuse. In California alone, 41% adults reported anxiety symptoms October 2020, compared to only 11% in early 2019. So that is a huge increase and still increasing. The pandemic had a lot to do with it. The causes of anxiety. And just keep in mind that there's still a lot to learn about anxiety. But right now, what we know is that the causes of anxiety are relative and it depends on the person who is experiencing them. So most researchers conclude that anxiety is a combination of genetics and environmental factors. When we talk about what causes anxiety, we usually refer to it as a trigger. Anxiety is rooted from an earlier trauma. Just going back to my example earlier with the marginalized group, the experiences of trauma that are inflicted by systemic oppression, such as microaggression, discrimination, racial trauma, all of those are experiences of trauma. So anything that can cause a feeling of disturb and distress can get locked in our bodies as trauma. So when that happens in a person and it doesn't get talked about, this becomes an unprocessed memory. And when this gets triggered, the same exact emotions and feelings come up as if it were happening all over again. All of us have our own unique story, our own unique experiences and struggles. What has helped me with managing my anxiety? It's definitely practicing self-awareness, mindfulness, and exercise. Exercising for even just 10 minutes. I mean, longer will definitely be better, but if you don't have time and you only have 10 minutes, it's still just as good as not doing it at all. Can really help because it not only distracts me from my anxious thoughts, but it helps me feel happier due to the release of the happy hormones such as dopamine and serotonin. Any type of movements, physical activity will help. Walking or running, and it's good to just try different things and see what works for you the best. And as I mentioned earlier, this is highly treatable and manageable. There are so many different methods and ways for you to start trying to see which one works best for you. Just remember, it's important to always check with your doctor to rule out any other medical conditions first. And if you're ready to explore and go deeper within and get to the root of your anxiety, a skilled therapist is highly recommended to help you through that process. Well, that is all I have for you today. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions at all. Send me an email or message me on Instagram. Thank you, and until next time, stay brave and own your journey. If you resonate at all with the stories on this podcast, and you're thinking about a change in your current situation, in your career, in your relationship, or maybe even in yourself, what's holding you back from taking the first step? Find out by taking the What's Your Biggest Self-Sabotage quiz that you can find on my website at mariagracewolk.com. Until next time, stay kind and own your journey. Thank you again for your time today. If you enjoyed this podcast, please be sure to hit subscribe, rate, and review. I would so appreciate it. The high rate and reviews will help others find the podcast so we can amplify, normalize, and break the mental health stigma. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. This is given with the understanding that neither the host or the guest are providing legal, mental health, or other professional information. If you need a professional, you should find one. This podcast does not substitute for personal professional services.